Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everybody. And it's a pleasure to introduce our very exciting speaker this afternoon. Will Weston worked as a visual development artist, layout artist, and background painter for Disney, Warner Brothers, Nickelodeon, and Sunny Feature Animation. Very impressive. Weston teaches in both the entertainment arts and entertainment design programs at Art Center in Pasadena. He has won Art Center's Great Teacher Award, an honor granted yearly by student vote. He primarily teaches life drawing, custom figure drawing, drawing for composition and digital painting for animation and film, and style development for animation and games. So outside of Art Center, and we're winding up, Weston teaches workshops for professional artists, for anybody that's interested. At DreamWorks, he teaches at DreamWorks, EIDO, and the Animation Guild, and the Society of Illustrators in LA. He also conducts workshops in Europe through at Bow Arts Entertainment. Samples of his lectures, demos, and student work from Art Center and his workshops can be seen on Instagram at Will Weston Studio, or you can just Google him. There's so many things about Will there. And today's presentation is about picture composition, I think. Right. So without further ado, Will, welcome.
Hi. So I'm going to get into this. One of the things that's interesting, I'm just going to switch to my screen and just sort of start talking as I describe things to you. One of the things that's interesting about working in the entertainment field is that, you know, we make pictures very much the way they were made in the 19th century. So a lot of what we know in the entertainment field, we learned from fine art, and we basically translated it into application in the entertainment field. So, you know, if you look at, say, movies, they came from 19th century painting, you know, and so they basically learned all about how to do perspective and how to set up shots and how to do everything from 19th century painting. And actually TV came from vaudeville. So movie has a deep set, TV has a narrow set. That's the history of it. What I'm going to talk to you today is basically how the entertainment industry, and me as well, because I've sort of organized all of this, have broken down a lot of what you think of when you're doing paintings into basic principles. And if you understand these principles, then it's basically much easier to organize your work, because you work in a much more directed way. You're not just feeling your way through, you're actually using principles that are there whether you know it or not. So whether you are aware of these things are in operation. So I think you're better off being aware of them than not being aware of them. The basics are: an upward facing triangle is impressive, intimidating, and exclusionary. A downward facing triangle is less impressive, intimidating, or exclusionary, but it's more inclusive. So basically, shapes convey a certain kind of emotional content. And one of the most basic ones is whether a triangle faces up or down. I'll show you how this works before. The rule of threes, and this can be applied to anything: big, medium, and small, light, medium, and dark, thin, medium, and thick, low contrast or detail or texture, medium contrast or detail or texture, high contrast or detail or texture. These are three is the smallest number that can comprise a group. So if you organize things by thinking in threes, you'll get a great deal of variety, and you'll also retain a lot of clarity in your pictures. So it basically helps you to get more detailed, but to keep your pictures clear. The basic shapes are triangles, circles, and squares. Triangles are active, circles are peaceful, squares are stable. More on that in a bit. And overlaps, those of you who are landscape painters will be aware of this. Overlaps, if they're really elaborate like these here, are basically silhouettes describing things but flat, and the overlapping planes allow us to describe everything going into the distance, okay? And so we can set up entire paintings using just this and nothing else. We don't have to use anything else, and we can make a complete painting. Overlaps can also be used, for example, they're frequently explained in design books like this, We can draw a bush like this, or we could draw a cloud like this, okay? And what I put down here is there are too many basics to cover in an hour, but these are a good start. These will cover what I'm talking about today, all right? The next thing is we break everything down into line, and most of the time, you know, we start with a straight line here. Straight lines are great for measuring. Problem with straight lines is that they're all the same. And straight lines basically become boring if you use too many of them. When I draw, I mainly draw using arcs of various sorts, and I have my arcs interact. The other thing that we'll get in here is S-curves. S-curvy lines direct the eye. Also, we get things like short descriptive lines. So when I was drawing these things over here, I'm showing the overlaps using line. There are many, many things we can do with line quality. I have more on line quality at the other end of the shape of the page. Overlaps are shapes. So when I come in here and I do this, I'm showing, you know, some grass. We just can't see anything inside. And I'm using the lines to show the shape. Okay, so there's nothing inside the shape. It's flat. I'm using lines to show the shape. And in fact, I can come in here and use lines to show a whole variety of shapes, right? And as I said before, I can do an entire painting doing just this. Shapes are also very, very basic shapes. Like if I come in here and I fill this in, that square is a shape because it has no dimension, okay? Shapes can be any color or value. So I can come in here and have this be in here. Shapes can actually have lines inside too, but I have to see the shape first. Here I have a shape, and that gray shape I can see because it's surrounded by black and it's surrounded by white. So on this side, the gray shape is surrounded by black, and all the other sides it's surrounded by white, but it's a shape. If I come in here, I'm showing a white shape, but I'm using line to do it, okay? So what's happening here is, in this case, I'm only using shape, and in here, I'm using line and shape together to describe the white space, all right? Form starts out with our basic shapes, like up in here, triangles, circles, and squares. Triangles are active because they're very pointy. It's easy to tell the difference between triangles. We have too many triangles. It makes people nervous, which is good because you want emotional content in your piece. So if you start using a lot of triangles in a composition, it'll start to make people nervous. Triangles are also pointers. If I go like this, you're going to look this way because the triangle is telling you to. Circles are peaceful. If I combine them like this, they just look like bubbles floating next to each other. However, circles are eye traps. By and large, when we see circles, we just see bits and pieces of circles. And basically, squares or rectangles are stable, which basically means one side is the same as the other. And this gets into composition, because if I put this here and I put a line on this 40-60 line, which I'm just about to go over, I've just taken that rectangle and divided it in two, but you're not looking from one side to the other. You're only looking at the division between the spaces. In other words, this here is no more important than this here. Whereas if I use a triangle to do this, given that the eye will flow into a bigger space, if I do this, it doesn't matter that I cut the tip of the triangle off. The tip is right there. This is where the eye will go up on the top. Okay, so right at the very beginning, what we're starting to do is divide space in a composition. So let me come up here and show you this rectangle here. When I'm teaching this class to different people, I basically limit measurement. So I'll come in here, and right in here, we have a measurement that's based on 1/3, 2/3. Here, I put this X because it gives me the 50/50 line. In film, not necessarily in fine art, the default horizon is on the 40 line, and the 60 line is here. So it's divided into 40, 60. And on the bottom here, I put 50/50. Oops, 1 second. I got that wrong. I do that sometimes. I'm going to put in 20/80. So here is 20, 80. Okay. So these are percentages, right? Everything adds up to 100. The most common ones are right here. And the specialty ones are another one. One is 1090, which I didn't put over here because it doesn't do what these other ones do. It's a specialty thing. It does something different, and I'll explain that as well. Now, when we're looking at these proportions, any of these proportions can be reversed. I can use multiple proportions on one side. In other words, this is a loose system. This is not the golden section. Okay, this is not a golden section thing. This is a simplification of something called formal informal subdivision of space. Oh, by the way, on the form down here, I broke down these and I didn't get to the full forms. Forms are volumes. And when we come in here, I'm creating out of the triangle, we get prisms, cones, and pyramids. I get out of the circle a cylinder. I get, again, the circle, which you'll notice because it has no interior lines, nothing changes. So frequently we put a front on it like this, and I get a box coming forward like this. So everything we draw is made up of these shapes, everything. There's an explanation of that. They grow out of the basic 3 shapes over here. These are the basic volumes. So when you draw or you're painting, you're using line, shape, and form in different percentages. And the basic rule of thumb is I can do without any one of these. I can't do without any 2. So that's what I would tell students in a school. Okay. So to explain these proportions here, I'm going to say, don't believe me. I'm glad to hear that you guys do outings. If you go to the Getty and you go to their permanent collection, it's on the 2nd floor in the back. I will take students there and I'll show them a painting and I'll say, the first thing I want you to do is look at the length and look at the height. And you're going to see that, you know, this will be, say, 60 and this will be 40 more often than not. And here is the center. And then the first thing you're going to look for is the horizon. And if the horizon is at an angle going like this, it's going to go from 20/80 to, say, 40/60. Here is an angle. And what's going to happen is it's going to gently push the eye in this direction. Okay, because the eye wants to go into the large space. The eye has a tendency to drift towards the large space. So if we do something along these lines, if I do 50/50 like this, the eye doesn't know where to go because human beings aren't very good at basically determining things that are equal. In other words, there's no information there to tell me what's most important. If I come here and make the eye 40/60, so here is the 50/50 point, and I bring the eye down here, we will begin to drift up because the eye goes into the larger space. And as I said, this is the default for film. Okay, so 40, 60. And that's because human beings have heads and the actors' facial expressions and things are important. So we want the eye to drift up so that we'll naturally go towards their faces and we'll be able to see, how they're acting. Okay. If I come in and I start lowering the horizon beyond this point, and I come down to here, here it is. And now I'm going to go to 1/3, 2/3 right here. Well, now the sky becomes a bit more important. My character is going to start to take on a slightly more triangular shape, especially if he's close to me, because I'm starting to look up at him. Okay. Upward facing triangles are exclusionary, and the reason for that, and I'll show you that in a second, it's a very easy explanation. So here we have these characters coming in. So this is 1/3, 2/3. If I come down to 2080, so I come down here, suddenly the picture is about the sky. So we're going to start having, it's really important, the sky. And here he starts taking on heroic proportions, because as the horizon gets lower, when I look out ahead of me, the horizon's in the center of my vision. So when you lower the horizon, you're lowering my eye at the same time. That's because in movies, but also in compositions, the eye is a disembodied eyeball. And there's a way of thinking about this that'll help you. And I'll talk to you about that. So this gets to be heroic. Okay. If I go even lower, so this is 2080. If I go even lower to 1090, then we get into things like Lawrence of Arabia. And 1090 or less is really the way to think about that. Does the opposite of the other proportions. The other proportions keep the eye somewhere around the center of your rectangle, so the viewer will forget about the edges. You want the viewer most of the time, unless you're doing modern work, to forget about the edges. So one of the differences between, say, 20th century abstraction, 19th century landscape painting is the landscape painting wanted to draw your eye into the center, so you would experience the world of the landscape painting and momentarily forget the one you're in. Whereas modernist painting wants you to notice the edge of the painting, and they want you to notice the artificiality of the painting. That's what they want. With David Lean, he's pushing your eye way down. And since movies are about the world as we live in it a lot, you're going to have people that are that small, maybe an entire camel caravan crossing, a desert, and you're going to have a feeling of immense, immense sky up here, with overlaps showing clouds in front of the things in the back, like this. So this is 1090. Okay, so all of this is composition by squares. That's what it is. This here is a little different, because out here, these lines are going to converge. So when I do this, this is basically becoming a composition based on triangles. And they're going to be more exciting. Triangles are more exciting than squares. You want to be able to generate excitement, a sense of peace, a sense of danger, a sense of beauty. These are all emotions which we can set up by setting a composition up properly. All right. So here, the other thing is, because the square is equal, my eye drifts up, but it basically drifts up equally. It takes something new, like the addition of these characters, to tell the eye to go somewhere within that picture. In other words, this won't do it. This won't do it. It takes additional elements to make it work. Here, the eye is being brought over to here, because that's now the largest area in the composition. All right. So using an idea, say, like overlapping planes, I might come in here and have some of my major overlaps go like this. So here's 1/3, 2/3, here's 60/40, things like that. And I'm bringing things out like this. And then little minor overlaps, we're talking about structural elements in this picture. So we're just coming in, the major ones are going to exit at this point, and these are overlaps. And I always represent overlaps on the edge by showing where the overlap is occurring. That's what you're seeing me do. And remember, overlaps are basically this right here. The plane is rolling over, rolling over, rolling over from front to back. And that is going to create a feeling of depth without having to do a complex perspective drawing. All right. So I may come in here and say, like right here is the highest point in this foreground that I put in here. You'll notice that it's on the 40-60 line. I'm highly trained, so it's hard for me to not draw within this perspective system. So if I come in here, I might say on 50-50, which is used, it's a specialty device, it's used for balance. I'm going to have a tree trunk come out there. Then I may come over here to 1/3, 2/3, and have another tree trunk coming out over here. Then I may go to 20-80 over here, and then I'll drag this up to here, and I'll come to 1/3, 2/3, and I'm going to have the branches of the tree go like this. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm placing the tree inside the picture. See? But it's lined up on all of these points. Is everybody following what I'm saying here? Okay. What I suggest you do is go to the Getty and say, I only have this to work with and this to work with. Sit down, start by measuring the length and then the width. Go like this. And put the X in the center. That's number one. Then number two is come in here, find the ground plane somewhere in here, right? Here's 1/3, 2/3, you see? And start finding the exit points of different elements in the composition. So if I come in here and say, I could come in and say, well, here's a little change in direction. Here's a river bottom going here, right? This dodge here could very well be 1/3, 2/3, and then I might come over here, and this dodge here could very well be 40-60. Okay? The people who are good at this are like great composers. They use this like math. It's like math. I mean, if in fact you can go to the unofficial Paul Felix blog. So it's the unofficial Paul Felix blog. He's actually a person in animation, so he's somebody from animation that you would be learning from. But you know, he's great, so he's a good one to learn from. Now let's come in here and put in some downward facing triangles that maybe we see in our picture at the Getty. So if I come over here, there's the center. Here's 40-60 here. I'm just going to bring an angle in like this, and then I'm going to have an angle coming out like this, and then maybe I'll come over here, and I'm going to make it 40-60, but below. So it's slightly lower, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm starting to plot in, and you're going to see this in paintings. Here's 20-80. And what this is a downward facing triangle right here, disguised as the bottom of a valley. Okay. And then I'll come up here and say, well, 1/3, 2/3, 40-60, 20-80. I may come and bring it in from here to here. So it's 2080 going down to here, to here, to here, to here. And what I've done is I've put impressive mountains in the background. So this is a composition based on upward facing and downward facing triangles. And the ones that are downward is a welcoming valley that you walk into. And in the distance, we have these impressive mountains in the distance that are impressive because we're looking up at them. Okay? So what you have to realize is that it's where your eye is that matters. So if we're in a gallery and you're looking in a gallery, paintings have a viewing distance. So here is the painting. There's its elaborate frame. Okay. Here is the floor. Here is the viewer's cone of distance or cone of vision, or, basically. And then here is where the painting will begin, because the painting is a window on the world. Our cone of vision is a cone that comes out. In other words, a picture is what I can take in without moving my eyes. So this here, assuming that my character is about 6 feet tall, so his eyes are 5.5, this will happen, about 9 feet. This is a little close, but it'll start out at about 9 feet from here. Okay. However, in a movie, all a person is a disembodied eyeball, because we have no body, right, in a movie. Otherwise, where am I when I look at, a spaceship in space, right? Shots will bring me in, pull me back, right? So basically, the viewer is a disembodied eyeball. So if the painting is here, I can put the viewer's eye right here, in which case everything here in the painting is going to be right in front of the eye, and that's going to rearrange how I see things a little bit. So what happens is, in film, we learn everything from landscape painting, but we also realized eventually, and this is like in the 1930s, realized that it's really not like being in a theater, because in a theater, you have physical people in a physical space. And if you look at a movie, it's actually a virtual experience, right? Because you're not there. You're actually there, and we're placing your eyeball, your vision, wherever we want it. So I can have you look down now. I can have you look up then, right? I can move you in. I can move you far away. All right. And we use these proportions to do it. The proportions make everything work. All right. Here's another thing with these proportions. Proportions can be the same, but change the character of something dramatically. And so when we're drawing our objects, and when you get to man-made objects, you're going to discover that there's not a lot to do, because designers are aware of these things. So they will actually go in there and do these things. Here's a 1/3, 2/3 with a little 10% at the top. I come up here. There is the top. Here is a water tower. And what I'm doing here is putting the water tower in. And then here is the base of the water tower. Sometimes I'll put the back on an angle like this. So there I'm messing around with the back. That's 2080. So I'm putting it on a hill. Then I might come in here and balance it by putting something there, here, and then I put in some construction methods to make it believable. Okay. But if I take the same proportion, I can design another water tower, or look at another water tower. And I'll put 10% up here again too. And I can say, so here's a big water tower. And then down here, same thing, same angle. I'm putting the base of this water tower. But as you can see, even though the proportional system is the same, the towers are completely different in character. Okay. When you're looking at an object and you're drawing an object, what I tell students is use only these proportions. Only these. No others. Ever. Okay? Because if I look at 40-60, there's a 10% difference, and I can tell that they're almost the same size, but one is clearly bigger than the other. If I do 45-55, I'll be confused for a moment. Okay? And if you're in the habit of doing these kind of in between, in other words, you're a very subtle person, right? As a subtle person, you see things subtly. Subtlety is very overrated, and clarity is undervalued. If you want people to understand what you're doing, forget the subtlety for a moment, make everything clear. And what you'll discover through clarity is that you can really get subtle. You can make subtlety really work. But the first thing people have to get actually is clarity. So no matter what you're looking at, it's going to mainly be 20/80, 40/60, and 1/3, 2/3. And for specialty purposes, you'll go in there and use 10/90 and 50/50. And people think this isn't possible. And once they start doing it, they understand it is completely possible. What do you get? You get clarity. You get clarity. All right. So if I come here and I design a shack, and I'm going to come and make it 20/80. All right. I can design my shack so it goes like this. And then here is the base of the shack. You'll see a lot of sort of indigenous housing and around the world will be built this way. Okay. So what is the top? This is a cone. What is the bottom? The bottom is a cylinder. What is this? The top is a cone. The middle is a cylinder. And the bottom is most likely a square for stability. You can't really see it from the side, but that's what it'll be. Okay? If I come in here and I take the same place and I do this, put the 20% on the top, then I don't have the same thing at all. I have what begins to look like a salt box, like an American salt box house, right? Which you would see in the middle of the country. They would, basically create a nice rectangle, and you'd start having windows and doors here and windows up here, and they would be slat-sided. You see them in Pennsylvania and places like that, right? So salt box houses, but both are 20/80. All right. What is this made of? This would be made of a flat prism and a box underneath. So when you do these things, and when you're doing drawings or paintings, the most important thing in the beginning is to get this. That's number one. And then coming in here, putting in slats, putting in shadows, putting in knot holes, which I always tell people to put in, even though nobody worth his salt would put a knot hole in a water tower, because, the knot holes will swell and pop out and you'll get leaks. But, this is number two. Number one is getting the volume. Number two is establishing the materials. So what do people screw up first? They go for the materials. Happens every time. That's what happens. They go in there and they start drawing wood, then they don't have a volume, and that's what causes problems. Now what you see is you can, one, proportion it, right? And then in this case, we'll say, two, you can come in here and get the volume. And then three is materials. Okay. So, when you're doing these things, this is just how you get your drawing to work, which is going to go into the composition, right? And so eventually what will happen is you'll come in here and say, put this in. I want the eye to go here. And maybe you'll put a vanishing point in there like that. Also, it's a target, doesn't have to be a vanishing point. But I can start saying, this is where I want my box to be, and it's going to point in the direction that I want it to go. All right. So is everybody sort of following what I'm talking about here so far? Pretty straightforward, pretty clear?
Yeah, amazing.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is talk about how to build your environment and how to build your stage. This is really a fun part of all of this. Okay, we're going to come down. This is the part that I like the most. All right. And that is, we're going to come in here and say, okay, I have my composition here, but I want to have a focal point. I want to have depth. I want to have all this stuff going on. And again, in what I do, I'm going to have human actors, okay, or animal actors, or just an object. In your case, it could just be an object that's most important. And again, when we talk about doing the basics, you can't do it in an hour, but we can get a long way. So this is 1/3. This is 2/3. This is 1/3. Oops. This is 2/3. I'm going to keep it a very quiet composition. I don't want too much going on. I don't want it to be too exciting. So I'm going to use a rectangle. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to start putting elements coming in here like this. And this is overlap. What I'm doing is I am placing, if I'm thinking in terms of shapes, one thing in front of another. Okay? Like this. If I'm thinking in terms of volumes, it's the same. I tend to draw a lot of cylinders because they're just fast and easy. So here are volumes going back. Truthfully, the lower a volume gets, it's beginning to pass underneath me, right? So down here, this is going to be bigger. And as we come up like this, it gets narrower. It'll be like this at eye level. So I'm looking straight at it. And then it's going to start going like this as it goes above my eye level. Okay. So that's just a drawing thing. Okay. Now here, I'm just going to grab this, copy it, and drag it over. Going to come down to here. Drag it over to here. Okay. Now, what this area is over here, the 1/3 on this side, is also a thing called overlap. And that means depth. Now, I think it's fine just to think of it as depth, but the industry term is overlap, so I use that, okay? And then over here, we have reveal. And what reveal is stage. Now, for, Hollywood purposes, my characters, I have this here, my characters are going to walk in an area like this. So that's the stage, okay? And I need to have an area where my characters can walk around, because some of them will be here, some will be back here. I may have somebody walking into the scene or out of the scene. And the fact of the matter is human beings can't walk through an object, right? So they can't walk through the overlap because I've got a bunch of barrels there. So they need something over here. The other thing they need is to have the area, the focal point, which is going to be their heads in this case. It needs to be in an area that's simple so that it's easy to read the heads. So this area down here might have tiles, say on a wall or something. I'll come in here and put a door in here like this so that that goes back. I need this area in here. And by that, I mean, this area right here to be relatively simple because I'm supposed to look at the heads there, right? I'm not supposed to be looking at the background. I can have these other things going on. The other thing is all this detail in the foreground will tend to be dark because I can control its degree of contrast. So I get the benefit of all of this stuff creating a sense of depth, but I'm also knocking down its visual power by throwing it in shadow. You see? So it can't compete with the other side because shadows, we lose contrast, we lose saturation, we lose detail, we lose a lot of things like that. Again, don't believe me, go to the Getty. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. The only thing you won't see there is stuff shoved quite as close as this. Remember, the pictures are going to tend to start about 9 feet away. And that's because they're actually dealing with you, a human person, looking at an actual painting. And so they have limitations that we don't have in film, because in film, you don't have a body. You have an eye, but you don't have a body. Okay. So, as I was explaining before, we need overlap and we need reveal. And, as a painter, you may want to have, depth in your composition, and you may want to have open areas, and you may want to be able to feature a focal point of something of some sort. It doesn't have to be a person. It's just a focal point. Here, I was explaining that I can put my barrels here, see? So they're coming into the foreground because this is the stage going behind the barrels like this. Here, I have them going up. You see how they're going to, and as they go up, they're going to get rounder because as they get farther away from me, see, they're going to get rounder like this. I teach people how to sketch in perspective. That's my thing, right? And so I teach perspective, but it's how to draw in perspective. And then you could have a bunch of things back here if you want. They can't be quite as interesting as what's in the front. Okay. And then if I put my characters in here and they're walking into the scene, so as they come forward, their heads are higher, you see? As they go into the scene, their heads are getting smaller. And then as they come here, their heads are getting bigger again, and they can walk out of the scene on this side. Now, some people's heads are a little higher, some are a little lower. Now, what we're doing is we are maintaining this area so that around their heads, there is simplicity so that I know that I'm looking at their heads, okay? And in here, I know that this can be, darker in the foreground because I can set up the lighting. I also teach theatrical lighting. So if you go and take a look at the paintings at the Getty, especially, or the Norton Simon even is good too if you're in LA, especially if you take a look at the figurative paintings, you're going to notice that the lighting is intended to look as if it might be real, but it's not. The background lighting is flat, neutral lighting. The foreground character is lit 45 degrees left or right. So even in Sargent's paintings, even in these, any of these kind of portrait paintings you see, they're basically using theatrical lighting, and that they're using an inconsistent lighting setup. Okay, so this puts them in the middle. I could come here. I'm going to have the back be lighter than the front in this case. So I have these things, and they can't compete with the characters. So there's a lot of balancing I have to do in here. And then the characters are in here walking through the picture. See? And their heads are simple. Okay. Now, this is very centered, and I did this once before, so I'm just going to do it again. If I take this and push it off to the side, like this, bring it down here, and pardon me, I have to go to Edit, Stroke. Wait, cancel. I got to do something else. Okay. So now I've reframed the picture, and because it's off center, I've improved it for my purposes, because I can go in here now and I can have more visible set on one side than the other. So I can actually put in more visible set on one side than the other. But this here is going to be 40, 60. Do you see what I mean? And this advantage I have over here is that it lets me come over here. And again, I can put some things in here like this. And I always design a shape first unless I'm demoing, and then I'm kind of in a rush. But see here, what I'm doing is putting everything so it'll kind of conform to that shape in there a little bit. And I can have it down here too. I can cover the character's feet. I can come in here and have things down here. So where you put your overlaps and where you put your reveals is really part of the fun of designing a painting or designing a set. Because, and by the way, sets are just paintings used in movies. That's all they are, right? So, and if you're in animation, you're also designing the shot, and a shot is just a picture composition. That's all it is. So if we come in here, and I do this, and again, I'm shoving them way close in the foreground. See, because if I shove them in the foreground like this, you, the viewer, will really feel where you are in this shot. You're high up. And I'm going to have some of these shapes coming down here like this. Okay. Well, there is the depth on the roof, which basically means I can come in here and have characters milling about down here. And they can walk anywhere they want because there's nothing in their way. If I look at, say, a contemporary or, a impressionist painting, something like that, I will see things like this thrown in. It's not going to be as obvious as I am showing you. It will be more subtle, but you will have overlaps because they don't want their paintings to be completely flat. And they have a couple tools to work with. One is gradations and the other is overlaps. Okay. And the idea is to get away with it. Okay. So that'll be part of their plan, is getting away with it. You'll see things like this. I have a character sitting here, maybe at a table, talking to another person sitting here. Then we have unimportant people we don't care about at tables back there, I will have things going like this. And again, and what I'm doing is bringing the eye to my characters. And in this case, I'm doing it this way. I'm bringing it in by, I could also bring it in like this and have it exit like that. Does everybody see what I'm talking about in terms of bringing things in? Okay, so let me just stop for a moment. Okay, everything I'm talking, yeah,
Yep.
figurative stuff. And so I will break down design concepts that you see on this figurative work. Okay. So it's a little bit more complex than what I was showing you because I'm showing you demos. Okay. So let's take a look at this here. Okay. I'm going to, let me fix one more thing. I got to fix one more thing here. Hold on. See, this is your page that I want to give you. But now I have to make it deeper because this happens in all my. I recommend that what you do is pass this on to people using like WeTransfer, because these files are big, so that the resolution will be good when you get them.
Great, thanks. Arlene, I think, knows how to do that.
Okay. Yeah, it's very simple. WeTransfer is a great software. I use it. Okay, so here we go. All right. So if I come in here.
I can barely see it.
Can you see it now?
You make it bigger? There, that's
There you
better. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Charles Dana Gibson. He operated in the late 19th century. And he was famous for the Gibson Girl, if you ever heard of that. And so there are things that he's doing here. One thing you'll notice is that right down here at the bottom, let me get a swatch that'll work. I think I'm going to have to use a color, but I'll try to make it an unobtrusive one. Okay, so you'll notice that the chair is in front of the piano, and the piano is in front of the guy playing the piano, and the guy playing the piano is in front of the background. Okay? Those are overlaps. Those are overlaps creating depth. Okay? Now, he doesn't have to worry about creating a stage because his actors aren't going to walk around. They're just going to be where he wants them to be because this is a static picture. But overlaps create depth. So the other thing we're going to have is a downward facing, upward facing triangular composition, which takes us to all the important people in the picture. The snotty woman on the left, looking in cynically, on the awkward looking girl in the center, who's, Barbara Streisand at 12 or something, right? And here is the piano player, has a little bit of sympathy maybe. And then here is the impresario, who's neutral. He just wants to see if this kid's got anything or not. Okay, so that's a downward facing triangular composition. We feel empathy for people who are going down in the composition, and we feel, somewhat impressed by, but more in this case, intimidated by people high up in the composition, see? So this is going to go like that. So you'll notice that his arm, the other thing you'll notice is that, basically the perspective points in the picture generally lead to his head, okay? This picture is tightly constructed. This is 2080. This is in here 1/3, 2/3. This is 40/60 because that's the center. There you go. This is 40/60 on the other side. And the front of his face is 20/80 coming in from the other side. You see what I'm talking about? If we come here, I love showing this to my students. And I tell them that this is about the importance of interesting facial hair if you're an artist, okay? Because otherwise, how are they going to know? Now, what we have is the Gibson girl, which is this young woman here. We have the older guy, me, you know, looking anxiously at the younger guy who's about to supplant me. And then generally the eye is drawn in this direction towards the door, okay? And 20/80, even in here, you'll find these little incidentals. And don't forget to measure going in this direction, okay? So that's doing the same thing. And you'll notice everyone is overlapped on top of everyone else. There's something else you're going to notice here, and I'll talk to you about that in the middle, in a minute, but the backgrounds are flat. All of these characters are basically character studies that are silhouettes. This is called a turnaround, and we're basically making sure that that character can be read as himself in all positions, okay? In my figure classes, I tell students that you're going to have 45 degrees facing right, 45 degrees facing left, flat facing right, flat facing left, back, front. That's about it. That's what you're going to see in human poses most of the time, because 45 degrees represents depth the best. Flat is good. The back of the head is the front of the stage. Facing me is the back of the stage. Okay, so coming here, this is a circular composition, but the circle is turned on its side, so it's an oval, giving us an opportunity because there is the ellipse, which is in the middle, you see? And the ladies are sat around the table. The two women whose backs are towards us, they represent the front of the stage. They're essentially unimportant. They're like a bush in a painting. It represents something that I look beyond into the picture to see. And the corners allow nice overlaps. And then I can see a range of expressions with the characters on the other side. Here, I see the same thing, okay? There's a division though. So, you know, everybody's acting appropriately. She's appearing shy. What happens is he has brought an unwanted newfangled device into this Victorian living room, the wooden camera. And, you know, because, you know, he's all, you know, he's cutting edge. And all of these people are reacting to it negatively. They don't want their image captured by the image capturing box. Here is the oval, okay? And you'll see, you know, basically flat, flat, almost 45. He's a little bit off to one side, a little bit. There's a 45. There's front. There's a little bit just off of 45, and that's just off flat. So you kind of use those things as targets and you'll see it. Plus, you'll see all the proportions in here. You guys beginning to see the proportions, right? After a while, you just see it. You just see it. It's in every painting you're ever going to see. If you go take a look at analytic cubism, you'll see it in analytic cubism. 20th century does get rid of it because the 20th century was about getting rid of it. That's what it was about. But the minute people forgot about it, these came back. So 1/3, 2/3, 1/3, 2/3. When I balance across the center like this, 1/3, 2/3, 1/3, 2/3, what's happening is I'm balancing my composition across the center. Everything else is working the same way. And by the way, putting a pole in a composition is a great device because you can arrange people around a pole. It's just this great trick that is used all the time and people just don't even think about it. Notice that all of the important heads, no lines are touching the important heads. No lines. This is an important head. This is an important head. These are little runners. They have to run up to the house, but they're not all that important. So they have, images around their heads. If we come down here, here's like a nice old man with his maid in the morning. And if you look here, you're going to notice here's his head. And let's take a look at these pictures. Let's see. I have to find my cursor. Okay, there we go. Here, here, here. You're going to find a lot of angles that are pointing towards him. This is that targeting system I was talking about just briefly. Zoni, it was a good idea to ask me, wasn't it?
I love it. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's more than ample to show us
See what I mean?
visible.
And then
visible
here,
ones,
I'm reluctant to show this to you, but here are women investigating what they called the weaker sex in the 19th century. They're poking it with a pin, and it appears to be a tiny little man down here. Okay, so they're investigating, and again, it's all about overlaps. And I won't draw over all of them. I'll just kind of leave them here. This is using an idea called close together, far away. So here is age on this side, signs of spring. And he's just tired of everything. He's reading the newspaper and thinking the world's gone to hell. And here, young man and woman. Here we have lovebirds. Here we have squirrels chasing each other up and down the tree. So it's a joke. It's a joke. This is like a 19th century graphic novel. This is in Montmartre, in the Latin Quarter in Paris. This is Whistler. This is Picasso. This is, I forget his name, but these are actual artists. And then here, you can now see overlap, 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 overlap. Overlaps in the front, overlapping everything in the back. Overlaps are what create depth, overlaps, and gradations. Proportions will be the same. This is the social embarrassment of the daughter because her country bumpkin parents came to visit. In other words, embarrassment, being embarrassed of your parents is as old as, everything. Again, same things, same thing, same thing. So it's all social, it's all social satire from the 1880s. And, but it uses all the devices we're talking about. And I guess that helps. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So, coming in here, we place the overlaps wherever we want. And now I want to talk to you about the real reason that this proportional system works so well and why people like it, okay? And if you go to the Getty, realize that, or the Norton Simon, many of these people lived several hundred years apart from each other. They didn't know each other. They lived in different countries, but they all did the same things, which means one way or another, they all arrived at the same conclusions. So if I come in here like this, I'm going to not waste that nice big square. I'm going to come in here and say this. These are the most destructive areas in your composition. It's the corners. You want to keep people out of these corners. The corners are all triangles. They are all equal in size, and they're on the corners of your composition. Those are the most destructive thing in the composition, and it's just built right into it. So we use devices to keep people out of the corners of the composition, and we start with our proportional system. So if I come in here, there's my center, and I go 40, 60, 1/3, 2/3, I have this very slight hill in here. Okay. Then 50-50, 50-50. I come down here to 1/3, 2/3 to 40-60. I am now pushing the eye over and down a little bit because that's the biggest area right down in here. So I can say that's where my character is going to show up, right? So I may come back here and say, here, 20-80 to 1/3, 2/3, come in here like this. And what I've created is a window frame inside the window frame using my proportional system. So I've created a window inside the window. The big window is obviously the outside of the frame. The inside window is the white spot that I'm leaving open like this. And that feels like a fairly normal kind of mid-range area right in there, okay? If I come down here, and again, here, I'm going to go 1090 to 2080. I'm going to go 2080 to 1090. I'm going to go 1/3, 2/3 to 2080. Okay. And then I come here. This here is the same device. It's describing open space as opposed to neutral space. See what I'm talking about? Okay. Let me make it a little less abstract for a moment. I'll come in here and say, okay, here is a log coming into the foreground like this. Okay, and I have some other logs coming in like this. I'm going to break up this area a little bit. Here are trees in the background. Here is a character right here. Here are more trees in the background over here. And then I rough up the area. When I rough up the area, what am I doing? I'm covering the trick. I'm covering the fact that I'm using these proportional systems, okay? So that's a doorway composition set in the outdoors. If I come in here, here are my pieces of wood down here. This is barely visible over here. I put the same size character in here. See how open the space feels? In other words, the space he occupies feels expansive. The space, that's what it is. Let's try another one. Let's come in here. Kick it off to one side, and I'm going to say here. I'm going to go here, halfway point, 60-40. I'm going to come in here, 1/3, 2/3 to 60-40. I'm going to come to 60-40 to one. Now I'm going to come to 60-40 to halfway. Okay. And halfway is a balance point. It's basically what that's used for, is balance, to balance the composition. So I bring this in. And my same size character will start to feel trapped in the space. Okay, you see what I'm talking about? Now I can add things to this. I can go like this, and I start now he's really trapped. Starting to feel a little uncomfortable here. You see what I mean? It's the triangles. I'm throwing triangles in. He's got no space to move. He can't go left. He can't go right. You know, that's it. If I come in here, I'm using all arcs. Arcs are beautiful and rhythmic. If I start doing this, I can do it with a brush, I can do it with a pencil, doesn't really matter. I'm creating beautiful shapes brushing against other shapes. If I come in and start doing this, I'm chopping out a bunch of triangles and I'm giving my little guy here nowhere to go. Okay. So I can even put in triangular shadows. Okay. So here, fairly open, kind of nice, beautiful shapes, right? I might even show some coming across in the distance like this. Stopping, of course, on 1/3, 2/3, because we always use the proportion, and always stopping on 60/40, because that's where it goes over there. You see what I mean? Everything stops and starts on this proportion. Once you get used to it, drawing becomes easier. Drawing becomes easier. All right? So let's talk about, now we've talked about how we want to contain our elements on the inside, right? All of these keep the eye focused inside and away from those edges. You see what I mean? So that's one of the things that we're doing, is we're keeping the eye somewhat centered and away from the edges. Here, you know, again, I'm doing a, you know, if you take a look over next to us, you'll see this all the time. I've just got random stuff in the front. They're sitting here, and I'm going to start putting in ground planes that are going to indicate that we're going back. They're sitting back there. Put a curtain over here that you have to look beyond to get into the picture. I've got a painting, or I've got a drawing. Okay. So let's think about something else. We have certain kinds of shots that we do. All right. In movies, all movies are voyeuristic.
Will, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that it's 2:21.
I'm
And
good.
about how much more time do you think you will
Give me
need?
about another 10 minutes and I'll be done.
Oh, good.
Fantastic.
right.
It's so good. I didn't want to feel like I was cutting you off. Okay.
Not to worry. I'm just going to show you a couple different kinds of shots so you can have some fun with them, and then, you know, we'll take it from there.
It's amazing. Thank
So
you.
one of the things that we all like to do is eavesdrop on other people. But, you know, how do we show that we're eavesdropping on another person in a movie? Now, movies are all voyeuristic. Paintings are all voyeuristic. We are looking unimpeded into the private lives of other people. And that's just what it is. That's what it is. I mean, you know, if you look at, you know, an impressionist painting, you're looking into the, you know, the lives of people in the 19th century holding their babies, washing babies, walking up and down. They don't know you're there, right? But in a movie, we need to be able to indicate that people are having private conversations. So we do this. Here is Mulan talking to her grandmother. There's Grandma. And here's Mulan saying, I don't want to stay here and do laundry. I want to go to war. Then we have all this stuff. And then what happens is we have this bamboo that's right up in the foreground like this. Now, this shot in movies is actually called hiding from, spying on. So what I'm doing is I'm coming in here and placing something. And if I put this in, see, I'm putting this in for beauty. I'm placing things in front of Mulan and her grandmother. So basically, I'm literally sitting in the bushes and listening to them. I'm literally sitting in the bushes and listening to them. That's what I'm doing, okay? But in the movies, since movies are entirely voyeuristic all the time, it's not creepy. You know, it's not creepy the way it would be in life because of the nature of what movies are. Movies are sitting in a theater, eating popcorn, and watching people as they go through the issues of their lives, right? And we cry with them, we suffer with them, we're happy for them. But to do that, we have to know what's going on with them. So that means we have to sit and listen to them talk to each other. See? So if I come in here, see, there's Mulan talking to her grandmother. The same thing is true if, you know, if we have and I'm looking down and I see somebody here talking to somebody else in the window. There's the curtain, you know, and I'm basically looking into their apartment window. The implication would be that, you know, it's kind of like maybe I live in New York and I have a telescope in my apartment and I'm looking in other people's windows, you know, or something like that when I'm up there. So this is, again, a private moment. We're looking through a window at an angle and they don't see us there, see? So we're looking at this like this. And it's, you know, it's nighttime out maybe, so it's easy to see in and not be seen. And then, you know, not all the windows are lit, see? So we set it up. Okay. This is hiding from spying on. And all of these have the same construction. And that is that back here is the stage or the image we're looking at. And here, Mulan and her mother. This is the stage coming forward. In the foreground of the stage, this is where we have the bamboo, see, coming in. And then the viewer is here, you know, with a box of popcorn, sitting there and watching them. And they're looking right through here and seeing that. So the principle is we have a barrier between us and the person behind us, and that's how it works, okay? And you will see this a lot. And again, you know, when somebody describes it to you, you kind of go, well, that's creepy, but, you know, wait until you go and take a look at things. You're going to see that it happens all the time, and it never bothered you until I gave it a name. So if it bothers you now, it's because it's got a name, right? When I tell these things to people and they go to the museum and they see it happening over and over again, they suddenly think something they never noticed before is obvious, right? Oh, well, that's too obvious. I can't use that trick. Well, you never knew about it. You know, you spent your life going to museums and you never knew about it until somebody told you. Nobody else is going to know about it until somebody tells them. And once they're told, they're just going to think you know what you're doing. You know, that's what's going to be the result of it. So it's just nothing to worry about. Here, we're going to enter the painting here and exit like this, see? So here, I got to keep you out of the corner. So what I'm going to do is line these things up like this. And I might as well create a little depth while I'm at it. You see what I mean? When I get into this corner, I may just go low contrast. So in this corner, I'm just going to get very low contrast on things. So you don't want your corners to be the same because that's called bookending and it's just lame. So don't do that. So down here, low corners, but you're just going to go like that. Here, you know, it could be clouds or tree branches. Take a look. It's going to blow your mind. It's just everywhere. And then we just exit the picture. And inside of that is framed some version of this, right? And that just puts the whole thing together. Okay. And if we go over here, past these, I've sort of drawn on, you know, about a third of them. No, I actually have just drawn on a minority of them. And if we come over here you're going to get a little bit more on ground planes and, arcs and curves. Here's line work over here. Here is upward, downward facing triangles and transitioning the corner. Here I have a clear star. Here I have a group of important people, but no one star. Here, clear star. Here, these are the people we feel sorry for. This is the mob, pitchforks. These are the victims. So they'll be down like that. We come over here, and this is how to break things down. So here, we're dealing with volumes. So here are ideal or machined volumes. Here are irregular or organic volumes. So man-made stuff, plants. Everything's made out of the same thing. There are no exceptions, no exceptions. If you don't see it, it's because you're not seeing it. It's not because it's not there, okay? So a cone could make this. It also has a cylinder. A pyramid is this. A prism is this. This is made of a prism, a flat square, and a cylinder right here. This here, which is a light, is made out of a ball, part of a ball that's bigger, a cone, a cylinder, a cone, and another cylinder, okay? This here, which is one of those little things you tighten a hoodie with, is made out of, a ropey cylinder with a mechanical cylinder. These balls turn into cactus. These cubes turn into boxes. This is a pyramid, but it's a stone. And then here is the beginning of a stone wall or a building, and it's made out of 2 boxes and some prisms, okay? When I'm talking to students, I talk about the design process. Everything is about silhouette. So your first silhouette is the overall shape. Then you design your silhouettes within the silhouettes. This is both 1 and 2 are design, and 3 is resolving the drawing or the painting. That's when you turn the shapes that you've created into an object. This is a prism, then this is a corrugated tin roof. This is a cylinder with a cone, a little bit organic. I make it a little bit more organic and I proportion it, right, using my proportional system. And then I turn it into some weird, Harry Potter tower. And that's the whole thing. So that's already in an hour and a half. So let me do this. Let me stop and say, does anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
What happens to a painting when you don't apply these devices? Does it become unappealing? Is it like in an abstract, or is it just weird, or are you doing it unconsciously anyway?
Well, I'm going to make a distinction between painters who are really good painters and painters who aren't really good painters. I used to take people over to the Southwest Museum, my students. I liked the Southwest Museum because about 1/3 of its painting collection was really terrible. And it would be hanging in the same room with 2/3 that were really great. And I could just see, look at this terrible painting here. See how it goes flat? Look at this one here. It has overlapping planes, right? Look at this one here. The eye doesn't know where to look. Look, this one over here uses the proportional system. And, the students would instantly see it. So what happens is people see paintings and they're disturbed by something in the painting, but they don't really have the language and they don't have the intellectual framework yet to think about it. When I see a painting and there's something wrong with it, I will know what's wrong with the painting in like a nanosecond. I mean, I'll look at a student piece and I know what's wrong with it and the time it takes to take the breath to comment on what's wrong. And I have to slow myself down, right? And this is really the difference between someone who's actually professional and someone who's not. If you look at Jackson Pollock, he uses a proportional system. He also puts cool colors down first and warm colors in front. And what happens is they basically said he was doing landscapes because he was letting it get cooler in the back and warmer in the front. So he responded to that and went to black and white. So they said analytical cubism is laying one shape on top of another. That's overlapping planes. That's landscape. So suddenly you have boxes next to each other. You see what I mean? So what they would do is they were trying to get away from all this intellectual knowledge that had built up over, say, 350 years or so. And in the 20th century, the idea was to free ourselves from that, which meant getting rid of it. And then you get to Ad Reinhardt eventually, who said painting's dead, because he painted paintings where the values were so close together that if you stared at the painting, it would slowly reveal itself. But if you tried to let your eye move over the painting, it would revert to black because they were so close together. And so he wrote poetry and said painting's dead, and that's very good for you, Ad. And they all went to bed and got up the next day and just kept painting. I think they declared the novel dead in the 20s or something because everything that could be done with the novel was done. Well, but now everything is done from different points of view, right? So when people do a painting now, they're doing it from a different point of view than people who did these paintings early on, right? So there's a lot that changes. What this does is it allows you to organize your painting in a way where people aren't spending all of their time trying to figure out what you're showing them. They basically can take it in and read the content, and then they figure it out second. In other words, they have a pure experience first, and then they, basically figure out how you did it second, which is better than what's going on here, followed by 15 seconds of, oh yeah, I get it. And what happens is, what kills you is making things the same size, and they'll show up in your painting, placing things equidistantly, and people will do it, not having clear overlapping planes, which means I can't tell what's in front of other things, not having good silhouettes, where I think I have overlapping planes, but I don't have clear edges between my planes, which means people can't tell where the edge is, which means they can't tell where the overlap is, which means that it doesn't work anyway, right? So, this is how it works. And, if you get used to this, then what people do is they get very good at hiding their tracks, right? So people set the thing up, and then they'll have one line go in a direction that's different, but not a major one. And that will cover the trick. So I always tell students that, yes, you're an artist that's talking about things that are personal and all of that. But in order to do that, you have a bag of tricks. So in that sense, you're like a magician, right? And the magician sets it up and then covers the trick, sets it up and covers the trick. Another way of thinking of it is art is a lie that occasionally hints at the truth, which is a way of saying art, because we're using artificial means, is not real. A painting is not real life. I'm saying to basically set things up. Real life, if you actually start looking at things, if you go sit in a restaurant and look for overlapping planes, you'll find them. If you start looking for overlap and reveal, you'll find it. But it's not going to be perfect. You're going to want to make it a little bit more obvious in your painting. So that gets to another thing. Subtlety is overrated. Subtlety, be subtle, be smart, be more sensitive than the next guy. Artists have superhuman sensitivity. All of that is bunk. We're not any smarter than anyone else. We maybe see things a little different than other people do, but everybody sees things different than other people do. The difference between us and other people is we know how to take our observations and use these devices and use our skills and use our experience to present our experience to viewers. So the difference between us and other people is not that we see things that other people don't see. It's that we can represent what we think about the things we see because we have the craft to do it. Music represents feelings. Everybody has feelings, but not everybody is a musician. Only musicians are musicians, and musicians are musicians because they took the time to learn how to make music, right? Art is the only field I know about where they think anyone who knows nothing can go do it and it's all happy and everything's equal. It's just, look, art can also be therapy. Art for little kids. I have over, up here, a little heart that my daughter made me in second grade. It's very pink and full of glitter and has everything. And it says happy, and I love it to death. I framed it. It's now sitting up there, right? But, it's every other kid in that room made something that was similar. I know it, right? If you want to make things that are different, these devices don't make you the same. They actually give you the tools to be different than other people, because how I would use them is different than how you would use them. I said line, shape, and form. Some artists use 85, 90% line and 10% shape. Some artists use 85% form and shape and very little line, right? The way artists use the proportional system is vastly different. The only reason the proportional system works is because those proportions are identifiable, right? Yes.
Will,
Hi,
it's your neighbor.
how are you?
Good. I just had a quick question. What if your format is not a rectangle? What if you're working in a square?
Well, two things come to mind. One is you like to suffer, because if you're working in a square, you're starting with sides that are equally lengthed. So already you've got a problem. You now have to defeat the square, okay? And again, I'm talking about Western art. If you want to do something that's, say, based on Indian art, their art's based on the square. And I mean India from India, so, a lot of, non-Western art is based on squares. So that might work. You can do anything. You can do anything. You may be able to find a guy to come in here, or woman to come in here and give you a lecture just like I've given you on how to break down the square. But you could take the proportional system that I'm showing you, and it would work very well in the square. It would work very well in the square. Remember, the reason that we know how to do this in animation and film is because we have spent the last 122 years studying not only filmmaking, but 18th and 19th century landscape painting, and also figurative art. So Charles Dana Gibson, all of these people, we spent 120 years studying them and figuring out how to translate that into film. And so a lot of these little sort of, and they're just nuggets today. I mean, I taught 14-week classes full of this, and every lecture every week is different. But, the devices are all basically taken from painting, largely Western painting, because movies are largely Western, in the way they got going. There's a whole story to that, but I don't have time for that. But, so a lot of these paintings were, not cinematic. They were just off of a square. So a lot of them are fairly square anyway. But, one of the reasons that modernism started making square paintings was because it made the painting appear flat. It automatically made the painting appear more flat because the sides are the same length. I'm looking at you in a movie format. So my eye is going to naturally flow from left to right because we read from left to right. So I'm just going to follow the top of your shelf, which is to your right, and your art supplies, which leads right into your head. Very good design, by the way. And then down to your little file in the back down there, and then out the pictures. So I have a little S curve that's going through your composition. I arranged myself so that the vanishing point of my bookshelf is right behind my head. And I arranged myself so that everything will just come into my head on this side. So I am the focal point of my own world, okay? See what I mean? And so this can happen in real life. I have a sense of depth because on my right, which is over here, everything is overlapping everything else. And in the back, everything is flat. I put that chair there because I wanted a middle ground in my presentation. It's a little far back for the day, but so I think about this stuff all the time.
Obviously.
So, yeah. Now, I mean, I think about it without thinking about it. And I have a friend that I'm actually hiring for Drawing America. I have a friend who was a student of mine who just became a friend over the years. And if you see her background, I mean, you can absolutely tell that she's a designer. because there is not a single thing in that background that isn't where it should be for the page, including where she sits and the angle of her head, which I'm too sloppy for that. I can't do that. But this stuff, don't take my word for it, right? And it all works, by the way, with figurative stuff. And, if you guys are interested in more of this, the fact of the matter is I do teach these classes. I teach 6 weeks classes at a place called Drawing America. So if you're interested in more of these, or if you want to see more examples of student work and my demos, you can look at, my Instagram page, which is, Will Weston Studio. All it is occasionally a picture of a cat and demos and student work. That's all it is. So, and that's my gig. And I'm going to go over to Paris actually and spend 2 months teaching in Paris in about 8 weeks. And when I go over there, I teach the same thing as I teach here. When I was at DreamWorks, I was a teacher at DreamWorks. I never worked there as an animator. I taught the exact same things to them that I'm teaching to you. I didn't change a thing. And same thing at Blizzard Entertainment. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know if we have time, but you said bring your focus out of the corners, but the example that you gave had an entry point that kind of left the corner open.
Yeah, it lets that. If you don't want to close in all 4 corners, because it creates a feeling of claustrophobia. So we tend to leave one a little bit open. The default is to have it come in from the left, because we read from left to right, and it tends to come in, drop down, create a circle that goes like this, and you kind of go out. Now, you actually have multiple iPaths through a composition. So you have more than one iPath through a composition. That one solves a particular problem, and that's the problem of the corner. So that iPath solves a particular problem. You also have iPaths that take you from the front of the composition to the back of the composition. There are so many ways to talk about this that, honestly, just to fit in what I did, half this page is stuff that you basically can just read and add it up. The next class is printed up in here and you can see it, but, I have people that take these courses and, they just take them over and over again to get good at them. If you go on the Instagram feed, you'll see some of my students get very, very, very good. And, they're, as I said, they're online and, that's the way they work. And it's a live class like this one. Everybody does homework. I individually critique everyone. And then I record the critiques and I post those as well. So there's a lot of attention given in these classes. So, okay. And that's it for me anyway. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yes, thanks so much.
This was amazing. So
It
much
was
A little bit
incredible.
shocking to people when they first hear this, because it's really not the way a lot of people are taught about this stuff or have been led to believe that it should be. I did this at the Norton Simon one time. Norton Simon used to hire me to lead people through and teach composition in the museum. And I had 40 people. They all look pretty much like us, right? Museum lovers. So they're all sort of older people going through. And I explained what I showed you here, and I did it on drawing boards. And then I proved it with every single painting in the room we were in. And then their assignment was to go through the museum and find further examples. And, I finished the whole thing and I said, does anybody have any questions? And this woman raised her hand and I said, yes. And her first statement was, I don't believe it. I think they operate out of inspiration and this just is coincidental.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, is coincidental? I mean, that they're all doing the exact same things and they're born 300 years apart and they're in different countries and they don't speak each other's language, and they didn't travel and there was no internet, they came to it through different routes. But the point is that they came to the same place. And the entertainment business, being very practical, has said, the routes are interesting, but what we really want to know is the place they all came to. You see what I mean? And this is the place they came to. That's where they got to. The rest of it's interesting, how I got here, but that's where they got to. You'll see it in the Orientalists. You'll see it in, you'll see it anything in the 19th century. You'll see it. If you're in New York, go to the Met. Go to the Met. If you're in LA, go to the Norton Simon. Go to the Getty. I'd say go to the one on 405. If you're in any city with a big museum, they're going to have a 19th century collection. Go in there and take a look, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Also, if you have an early 20th century collection, that's, Cubism, that kind of thing, analytic Cubism, you'll see the same thing, right? Because, again, the 20th century was removing these things. It was all about removing these things. That's what it was about. But in the beginning, they were figuring it out as they went. It took 60 years to get there, And then everybody said, okay, that's interesting. And they started over again. All right.
Will, thank
All
you
right.
so much. For anyone that wants, Drawing America is online. Will is there. Other instructors are too. It looks like a phenomenal website. And I definitely encourage you guys to check it out and study more with Will if you guys can. Will, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very nice.
Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. And we look forward to that handout.
See you
And then
guys.
if anyone wants it, either contact Arlene, probably Arlene, because I won't know how to drop it quite as easily as she will. So thank you all very much. I'm going to stop the recording.
Mhm.
Thank you.